Welcome back to our study in the Gospel of Matthew. For the last few chapters, 5, 6, and 7, we've had the incredible privilege of sitting at the feet of the King, just listening to the profound teachings of the Sermon on the Mount. We heard his authoritative words. But now, in Matthew chapter 8, everything shifts. We move from proclamation to powerful demonstration. We go from hearing the King's teaching to watching the King in action. He comes down from that mountain, and we're about to witness his divine authority as it confronts sickness, commands nature itself, and completely conquers the demonic realm. Now, before we dive right into the text, it's really important that we get our bearings, theologically speaking. You see, Scripture unfolds according to God's distinct plans for different ages. We call these dispensations. And as you can see here, Christ's entire earthly ministry, including everything that happens in this chapter, takes place within the dispensation of law. He came to the nation of Israel under that Mosaic covenant to fulfill everything it pointed to, its prophecies, its requirements. So what he's doing here isn't setting aside the law. No, it's the very culmination of what the law was waiting for, the arrival of the lawgiver himself. So, here is our roadmap for today's study. We'll kick things off with an introduction and some essential historical background. Then we'll move into a verse-by-verse journey through the biblical narrative itself. After that, we'll unpack the deep theological meaning of these events, draw out some powerful spiritual lessons for our own lives, and finally, we'll conclude by tackling the one central question that this chapter forces us all to answer. Introduction. The King in action. From the Sermon on the Mount to demonstrations of power, this chapter, while it reveals a king whose compassion is just as boundless as his power, we're about to see the very kingdom he just proclaimed break into our world in tangible, undeniable ways, showing both his absolute authority over all of creation and his profound willingness to heal, to restore, and to save. Historical and cultural background. Understanding the world of Matthew 8. To really feel the shockwaves that Jesus' actions sent through his society, we first have to put ourselves in their shoes, in the world where these things took place. The purity laws, the unique social mix in Capernaum, and the cultural ideas about discipleship, they all form this critical backdrop that makes these miracles just explode with startling power. The very first thing Jesus does is profoundly radical, especially when you understand the purity laws of that time. Under the law of Moses, a disease like leprosy made a person ritually unclean. And this wasn't just a medical diagnosis. It was a sentence to complete social and religious isolation. To touch someone who is unclean was to become unclean yourself. But watch what happens with Jesus. His touch completely reverses the flow of contamination. Instead of being defiled by the man's uncleanness, his perfect holiness flows out of him, making the unclean man completely and totally clean. This is so much more than a healing. It's a powerful statement about his divine identity. Jesus then makes his way to Capernaum. Now, it's important to get the picture here. This was no quiet, isolated village. No, this was a strategic, bustling town right on the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea, a major international trade route. And because of this, you had this complex culture where Jewish fishermen worked right alongside Gentiles, including, and this is significant, a garrison of Roman soldiers. It's right here at this crossroads of cultures that we meet our next major figure, a Roman centurion. And finally, let's just consider for a moment what Jesus presents as discipleship here. A typical rabbi in that day, he'd have a home, a school, some stability. But Jesus, by contrast, reveals that he himself is homeless, and he calls men to follow him in a life of urgent movement. His statement, "Let the dead bury their own dead," it sounds jarring to us, I know, but it was a powerful way of saying that the mission of the kingdom takes priority over everything else. In a culture where honoring your family was a sacred duty, Jesus says that allegiance to him, the king, comes first. Following him wasn't just an add-on to your life, it demanded a complete and total recentering of your entire world. Biblical narrative, a king's journey, a verse-by-verse exposition of the chapter's events. All right, now that we have that crucial context set, let's walk step by step through the chapter, following the path of the king and watching his divine authority on display in each one of these remarkable encounters. Our first encounter is just heartbreaking and beautiful. A man with leprosy, a total outcast, comes up to Jesus. And I want you to notice his incredible faith. He has absolutely zero doubt about Jesus' power. His only question is about Jesus' willingness. He says, with this desperate humility, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." He just completely submits to the Lord's will. And Jesus' response? It's immediate, it's overwhelming. First, the compassionate touch, an act that was just unthinkable to anyone else, breaking through years of painful isolation. And then the creative, authoritative word, I am willing, be clean. And just like that, instantly, the man is whole. Next, in Capernaum, a Roman centurion approaches Jesus. And this in itself is just astonishing. A Gentile, an officer of the occupying army, coming to a Jewish teacher for help. And he's pleading not for himself, but for his servant who's desperately ill. But the truly stunning part is his understanding of authority. As a military man, he got it. He knew that when he gave an order, it was carried out because of the authority of Rome behind him. And he recognized that Jesus operated with an even greater authority, a divine authority, not limited by geography. He trusted that Jesus' word alone was enough to heal from miles away. And this faith, coming from a Gentile, was so profound that Jesus himself marveled at it, saying he hadn't found faith like it in all of Israel. The ministry continues, moving into Peter's house, where things get more personal. Jesus walks in and heals Peter's mother-in-law from a fever just by touching her hand. And I want you to notice her immediate response. She gets up and begins to serve them. What a beautiful picture of how true restoration from God leads immediately to grateful service. Then, as evening comes, the work just explodes. The news has spread and crowds are gathering, bringing everyone who is sick or demon-possessed. And with just a simple word, he heals every single one of them. It's then that Matthew gives us the divine commentary, connecting this flood of healing to the prophecy in Isaiah 53. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. From the quiet of a home, the scene suddenly shifts to the chaos of the open sea. As they're crossing the Sea of Galilee, a furious storm erupts. The Greek word is seismos, the same word for earthquake, and it's swamping the boat, striking terror into the hearts of these experienced fishermen. And right in the middle of this life-threatening chaos, Jesus is asleep. Now, this isn't the sleep of indifference, it's the sleep of perfect, absolute trust in his Father's care. Panicked, the disciples wake him up, screaming, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." His response is a calm, gentle rebuke, not for asking for help, but for the terror that had gripped them. "You have little faith," he asks. "Why are you so afraid?" He deals with the state of their hearts before he ever deals with the storm. And then he stands up, and with a simple command, he rebukes the wind and the sea, and everything becomes completely calm. The raw power of this act leaves his disciples just stunned. They had seen him heal diseases. They had seen him cast out demons. But this was something else. This was sovereign power over the very fabric of creation. And their awestruck reaction forms the central question of the entire chapter, a question they whisper to each other in fear and wonder. What kind of man is this? When they arrive on the other side, in the Gentile region of the Gadarenes, Jesus is immediately met by the ultimate picture of chaos. Two demon-possessed men, so violent they lived among the tombs, terrorizing anyone who came near. And what's so striking is the contrast here. While his own disciples are still asking who he is, the demons have no doubt at all. They cry out, "What do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" They know his divine identity, and they tremble before their future judge. But after Jesus delivers the men with a single word, the reaction from the town is just chilling. Faced with the miracle of 2 restored lives, but also with the economic loss of their pigs, they beg Jesus, the great deliverer, to leave. Theological significance of Christ's authority. Unpacking the deeper doctrines in Matthew 8. So, now that we've walked through the powerful story of this chapter, let's transition to a deeper analysis. We're going to unpack the foundational theological truths that these real historical events are meant to teach every single one of us. Let's look a little closer at Matthew's use of Isaiah 53. This is a masterful example of what we call dual prophetic fulfillment. The historical fulfillment happened right there in that moment at Peter's house, as Jesus tangibly showed his messianic power by literally healing the people's illnesses. But that was only a foretaste, a preview of the ultimate fulfillment, which would take place at the cross. On Calvary, Christ didn't just bear our diseases. He bore the very root cause of all disease, all sorrow, all death, sin itself. The physical healings in Matthew 8 are a powerful, living trailer for the complete spiritual and eternal victory he secured on the cross. You know, this one chapter is an absolute treasure trove of systematic theology. First, in Christology, that's the study of Christ, we see undeniable proof that he is the divine Son of God with absolute authority over sickness, nature, and demons. Next, in soteriology, the doctrine of salvation, we see just how broad his saving work is. He saves from physical danger in the storm and from deep spiritual bondage in the Gadarene men. Then there's hamartiology, the study of sin. We're reminded that sickness, natural disasters, and demonic oppression are all tragic results of the fall.
the very brokenness he came to redeem. And finally, in ecclesiology, the doctrine of the church, the faith of that Roman centurion gives us a prophetic glimpse that getting into God's kingdom isn't about your family tree, it's about faith in the king.
That encounter with the demoniacs gives us a crystal clear picture of a clash between two kingdoms. The demons, agents of Satan's kingdom of darkness, they instantly recognize their ultimate adversary. They know exactly who he is, the Son of God, and they know that a final appointed time of judgment is coming for them. Jesus' single command, go, it's not a negotiation, it is an executive order from the sovereign king, proving with terrifying clarity that his kingdom has invaded the darkness and will ultimately win.
Spiritual lessons for today, applying the truths of Matthew 8 to the believer's life. Now, this incredible chapter is so much more than just a historical record. It is the living, active Word of God, and it's filled with profound lessons for our own walk of faith. So let's take a moment now to bridge this ancient text to our lives today. The people who met Jesus in this chapter give us a powerful and practical model for our own faith, for our own prayers. First, like the man with leprosy, our faith has to start by acknowledging his absolute power. Lord, you can. We have to be completely convinced of his ability. Second, true faith humbly submits to his perfect will, if you are willing. Now that's not a lack of faith. That's the very height of faith, trusting his wisdom more than our own wants. Third, like the centurion, we must learn to trust the authority of his word alone, believing he is at work even when we can't see it. And finally, like Peter's mother-in-law, the only right response to his mercy in our lives is to get up and use our renewed strength to serve him with gratitude. The tragic choice of the Gadarene townspeople forces us to ask a deeply unsettling and personal question. They saw an undeniable miracle of deliverance. Two men, once a source of terror for their community, were healed, clothed, and in their right minds. But that deliverance came at a material cost. And in the end, they chose their economic security, their pigs, over the very presence of the Son of God. We have to let this story search our own hearts. Are there areas in our lives, comforts, habits, financial security, that we value more than the disruptive, liberating presence of Jesus Christ? Do we sometimes prefer our pigs to our deliverer? Conclusion: who is this man? The unanswered question that demands an answer. And so we come to the close of our study. This entire chapter, from the compassionate touch that cleansed a leper to the authoritative word that silenced a storm, it all drives us relentlessly toward that one single, awe-filled question first spoken by the disciples in the boat. He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." This question isn't just for them. It hangs over the entire gospel, and really over all of human history. It is the question that every single person must ultimately answer for themselves. May the Lord grant you wisdom and peace as you consider what it means for your own life. For more in-depth studies, visit the Grace and Knowledge series blog at woodybrohm.online.